this is my nostalgia Pinterest board. I went down a deep rabbit hole one evening. My husband and I were just looking at so many fun things from childhood, basically. And lots of these items on this board, I have the physical representation of, and I will be showing that in part 2. But the first half is my Pinterest board, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these items. So let's start with these candies here in the corner. So Razzles. If you don't know what Razzles are, they are candies that turn into gum, and you can still find them. I do have a few. They seem like they're going to change, and in your mouth when you're chewing them, you definitely think you're going to chew it and swallow it, yet it turns into a gum substance right at the end. So that makes zero sense, but if you've had Razzles, you know. And then Seedlings are these fruit-shaped gum, and they are candied inside. They've got these tiny little candy seeds inside of them. And I actually have some I'll be showing you in this video. You can open them up and see. There's a watermelon, a lemon, orange, and the little seeds inside. And many of you do know bottle caps quite familiarly because they've been around for so long, but also they were one of the biggest candies probably ever made. They are flavored like different soda, so Dr. Pepper or root beer, or even flavored sodas like strawberry. And I also have some of those I'll be showing you. I would say maybe 80% of the items on this board. I will show you the physical, actual item here in a minute. Now, moving along, this Walkman is very indicative of something I would have carried around in the late 80s. It's got a radio, which was never very good of a radio as far as reception went, but what you really focused on was the tapes. And here, this Memorex tape, if I could just tell you that I filled up hundreds of these tapes, because the way we would do it back then, if you aren't of age and don't remember this, we would record things from the radio. So songs we liked, or pretty much anything, came from the radio, and you could record over them. I definitely recorded several times on one tape. You would move on to something that you liked better. But that's what we listened to it on, our Walkman. And these little headphones are a bit different from the earbuds that we have nowadays. They have a small wire headband that is adjustable on the sides, and that is how you adjusted the size, if you will. And they were not super comfortable on the ears, but it's what we had, and we were happy with it. These are Holly Hobby sewing cards. Now, these are from the 70s, this particular photo here, but there are several kinds, and I don't recall which kind I have to show you, but I believe mine are more from the 80s. And essentially, these were cards with little holes in them, and it came with thread of some kind, namely yarn. And as a child, you would sew. Maybe you watched your mother or your grandmother sew, and this was your way to mimic that. And the needles were very safe, and there was no way that you were going to be injured with them, and so your mother would let you use these cards to sew and kind of outline, almost like connect the dots, but with sewing. And then this sticker book here. So I really wish that you could see the inside of this. It's stickers with a backing that is adhesive, but in a different way. You had to wet it, so kind of like a postage stamp. And we don't know the effects that those probably have on us now as adults, but this one, it says, it's hard to read, but you would lick the stickers or wet them in some manner. Let's be honest, we were all licking the stickers, and there were spots for them where you would place them, kind of like paint by number, but it was sticker by number. And so I will show you a sticker book. I've got one. Moving on, this is fashion plates. Now, I was very, very fortunate to be in a thrift store, as I often am, and I came across fashion plates, and guys, I was in shock that I found them because they're hard to find. They were a favorite for so many young girls growing up and young boys that maybe had a hint for fashion at a young age. These are traceable. You can place the paper inside and you go over it back and forth with colored pencils, or some of them have the carbon copy that you would go over with. There are a few different varieties. So the one that I acquired is slightly different from this one, and I can't wait to show it to you. Tinkertoys. So many of you will remember these. Basically, they're little pieces of wood, and they come together to build things. So I wouldn't necessarily call them building blocks, if you will. However, most of us are familiar with these. The different lengths of the pieces and the variety of the colors made you able to really create things outside of the normal building blocks. So, and you can see an example of this here on the box, that there are several different varieties of birds and windmills, and the list goes on. And I believe that the Tinkertoys that I found at an estate sale even have an instruction booklet inside that will show you some cool ideas that you can make. And I've played with them recently, and they're still just as much fun. Now, Kaboodles. I actually acquired 2 Kaboodles, and I would love to say that I purchased them just so that I could show you. But after I purchased the first one to show you, I found another more modern one that I like. And you can find these now, but the body style is different. Now, there are a few of them that are part of a vintage type line that is kind of a throwback to the 80s. But there's just something about having that original Kaboodle. We didn't have all of the extensive makeup storage options available to us now. And so Kaboodles were quite revolutionary. You can see here there's a mirror that folds up easily. There are several compartments that come out on the sides depending on the style. And then there's a large, deeper area here below where you could hold larger items or even clothing if you wanted. You could put jewelry in here when you traveled. So pretty much every girl in the 80s had a Kaboodle. I certainly don't know anyone who didn't. Now, this is the old America Online or AOL screen. When we first started really signing on online, it would tell you up at the top you're connecting, and you'd hear the little dial-up sound that we're also familiar with. Maybe many of you aren't, but if you're my age, you definitely have heard that connecting sound. And the connecting sound went in steps. So it would tell you we're connecting and throw some numbers across the screen for you, and then suddenly it would say welcome, and it would say you've got mail. And most of the time you did have mail because that was the very beginnings. Even then, the early adapters had already learned how to send spam. But I saved this little picture because I thought it was pretty cool. Now these candy buttons, you can still find them a few places. I found some, I think, at the Five Below, which is a dollar store. They are basically just little bits of sugar with coloring, so they're not healthy in the least, but they are nostalgic, and I believe I had them for every holiday when we were growing up. Easter, Christmas, you name it. There were always some candy buttons, or candy dots as they are called. This is a Skadoodle. Now, I purchased a Skadoodle on Etsy and had it sent to my home, and immediate nostalgia took over. I remember owning one of these, and this part in the center is very similar to an Etch-a-Sketch. It contains some gold powder of a sort, and then there's a mechanism inside that draws on it, so it forms the pattern against the gold dust. Now, these little plates here, they sit in these little compartments, and they allow you to trace shapes when you want to. And like I said, I ordered mine, and it's vintage, and it's not in the best shape as far as the drawing mechanism, but it's the best that you can expect after this many years. This was an early 80s toy, and I did own one. I remember it very vividly. Now, this is Miss Mary Mack, and it's not a toy or food, but it is a song that so many kids would sing in school. Miss Mary Mack, 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 all dressed in black, black, black. And you guys probably know the rest of this song. I won't bore you with it, but here's just a quick synopsis of this brilliantly written Grammy nominee here. So anyway, let me get back down here. So Point of Law is a really old, many of you may not even recognize this. The reason I saved it particularly is because we had this at my grandmother's house. She had so many board games and things for us when we would come to visit on the summers, and I was introduced to several games just through visiting her. So this one, you act as the jury or the judge, and cases are presented to you, and it is up to you to figure them out and to give a verdict. And since I have this physically, I thought, well, I will add it to my board. So I deliberately added this one to show you the game when we come to that point. Now this is how to peg your jeans. Now I will just say this, we never called it pegging, not where I grew up anyway. In Texas we called it tight rolling. So how it works is you take your pants, which were all very wide-legged by the way, and then you flip them over to the back and roll them up. I'm sure this is not news to many of you. You've seen this or you've done it yourself. But in the 80s and even for an early portion of the 90s, we liked to roll or peg our jeans. I know that I didn't leave the house without my jeans tight rolled, and I am doing the air quotations right now. And then this here is Slim Goodbody. And I'll be really honest, he creeped me out when I was younger. I remember seeing him on television. This appears to be maybe a record or a CD. I think it's a record. Yeah, I can see the little paper on the side, but Slim Goodbody taught you about your organs and about the different systems. And while he might have been very effective had he not been wearing the bodysuit, he definitely creeped a lot of little kids out. But I still found him worthy of my board because he did dominate a great amount of television when I was younger. So this is a rock tumbler here, and I found a rock tumbler for a very good price the other day, and I grabbed it. But I think the one that I got is a newer model, and this one may be as well. Looks like you may still be able to purchase this one because there is a link to purchase it. But I owned a rock tumbler. I think I got it maybe for my 9th birthday, somewhere around there. And you take these rocks, gemstones that come in the box. To this day, I don't know if they were authentic, but you put them in the tumbler and they come out smooth and shiny. So the difference would be kind of like a rough piece of rose quartz goes in looking dirty and kind of jaggedy, if you will, and it comes out looking smooth and like a stone that you would wear in a necklace. Rock tumblers were very popular at that time. I do remember specifically asking for that and a beanbag chair, and if I'm accurate, I did not receive the beanbag until my 10th birthday. So I think I got this one when I was 9, but I was still very happy. This here is perfection, and so your mission is to fill in these little shapes with these little pieces. And that seems very simple enough. But the trick is you've got a 60-second timer here. And if you don't make them, or even if you do, they all pop out at the end. Yeah. So it seems like such a silly premise for a game, but it was a very, very popular game. So bubblegum cigarettes, how inappropriate can you get? It's really almost like telling a child to smoke cigarettes, I feel, but we surely had them. And I also remember, and I think that's what they're going to say here, when you blow on them, the powder comes out. I don't want to click through it because it seems to make me lose my place. But when you would blow on these, different colored powders would come out according to which color you got, so as to resemble the smoke coming from an authentic cigarette, which is just terrible, but it existed and it is kind of nostalgic for me. So there were also candy cigarettes, which were different. They were made of a white, chalky, semi-sweet, weird kind of hardened substance, and they were different. These are just the bubble gum, and this white part here was actually paper. You could pull it off and just chew the bubble gum. All right, so this is USA Cartoon Express. And every day after school, if you got off the bus around 3 or 4, somewhere around there, this would be on. And the way it worked was the bus would drive up and let off more characters from whatever cartoon was coming on then. And it was kind of a symbol to us of the freedom of after school and being out of school. Now, there were different cartoons for in the morning before school, and I believe I have one on here, so I won't go into that yet. But just know that this USA Cartoon Express really was an essential part of your after school process. You had to have the right snack. You had to have your shoes off, perhaps your socks as well. It depended on who was over at your house. Was anyone outside waiting to play with you? Did you have a bike? What kind of neighborhood did you live in? But I would say that a great portion of kids my age were watching this like in the 80s. So, now, hand in hand with playing outside, growing up, you didn't survive in the summer without these. Now, this is true. I will say that when I had a child of my own and she was, 5, 6, 7, I would attempt to bribe her to go outdoors and play by having these popsicles, and she was not interested. Kids nowadays don't love these the way that we did because there are so many more options available. Let's just be honest. There's too much on the aisle. It's hard to sometimes even find these. These are terrible. They've got a lot of artificial everything in them. But I think we just wanted that bit of nostalgia for a minute. I'm really, really big on memory and scent and pretty much any sense that attaches to nostalgia. I'm really, really a fan. So I will get suckered into things like this just out of the pure bliss of remembering how cool it was back then. But similar to the bubblegum cigarettes and other things, a lot of these things were terrible for us. So it's not that bad that we don't have them anymore. All right, bath cubes. Now, whoever wrote this says flowery smell, and let me tell you, these are very floral. Now, I remember them because every Christmas someone would either give you these or you would see them in their bathroom. They are chalky little white blocks, and they have a different flower on each block, but I recall everyone smelling like the same flower. I think if you sat them in a container together, side by side, that one of them just takes on the flavor or the scent of the others. So, but I still see these in estate sales where maybe a little old lady has passed away and they're selling her items. Lots of them still have these in their bathroom. And I would suspect that many of them are still from the 80s. They just haven't been opened. So this particular mask here, our parents bought us these, as this person says, to trick or treat in, back when we just went door to door to random strangers and asked for candy. But I found this particular one. There was a lady who collected a lot of masks, and she had this one. She did not have the box, but I bought it for a couple of dollars, so that was okay. And I'm going to show it to you. You can't see it as well in the box. I have another picture down below I will show you. But basically, it was the cheapest little plastic thing ever made, with a rubber band string around the back that went on your head, and whatever garbage bag or sheet or drapes, curtains, whatever your mother had. If you had a seamstress mother and you were very fortunate, then you may have had her to sew something together, a potato sack, whatever. But our parents just weren't very hip to the whole spending $50 on a Halloween costume the way that parents are nowadays. Now this is a Screwball. We have an ice cream man that comes in the summertime, and I think it was in August he came by, and I went out and asked him if he had a Screwball, and he did. And so I bought it, and it is in my freezer waiting for this video. Screwball has a fruity flavor, and then at the bottom it's a big gumball. And by the time you've eaten all the ice cream, of course your mouth is frozen, but somehow it's still very comforting to find that cherry gumball at the bottom. You feel like you have accomplished something, although you have accomplished essentially nothing. But there are several cooler things now on the ice cream truck, but these and the push-up pops are my fave. Okay, so the Oregon Trail. Those of you who live in Oregon, it's the Oregon Trail. I know that many people say Oregon differently, but this was the game that when we had nothing but the big IBM computer in the back of my classroom in 3rd or 4th grade, you would take turns and you would go to the back and play Oregon Trail. Now, I will say that there were people, specific children who shall remain unnamed, from my class, Corey Harper, that would steal other children's time. You were supposed to be back there for 30 minutes. I think that on Fridays we got an hour. I can't remember, but the way it was there was a list, and so it could take days for you to get to the bottom of the list to be playing computer games in the back of the classroom, which was considered our computer literacy portion of the day. Now, the way things are nowadays, that seems just unheard of. But then it was fulfilling a requirement that the teachers had to give us some exposure to computers. Now, Oregon Trail was such a cool game. I think most of you remember the dying of dysentery, right? But there were many other things that could go wrong. You could have a problem with the wagon wheel, or several other command options that you had to actually physically type in. You didn't just pop on the computer and it worked. You had to hit a run command. You had to essentially know a little tiny bit of programming language, not much, but your teacher would kind of direct you in how to get on it. And our computer had, over here on the left side, a little sheet of paper taped up that would give the instructions on how to turn on the computer and how to access the organ trail. Because there were other games, but none of them were as popular as this one. And I actually have a CD-ROM version, I think, and I will show that to you. Moving along, Woolly Willy. I actually also have a Woolly Willy. I think many of you recognize this toy, even if you weren't from my time period. Most of us have seen this or a version of it, but this is by far the most popular one. And you see this little red item here. It's a pen. It's kind of like a red stick with a magnet on the end. It's basically what I would call it. And this is all magnet here. All of this black substance, it's shaved little magnet fragments. And now that I've got it pulled up a bit bigger, you can see that you can pull up the magnet and make different shapes on his face. So you could put a beard on him, you can give him some hair at the top. But this is a very, there we go again. I just have to keep on doing it, don't I? This is a very common thing that you would see maybe at the front of the checkout line at the grocery store. And you would ask your mother, you know, can I have this? That was that kind of thing. They know that that's great placement for a product to get a kid to chill out and shut up, if you will. Right here is Gem of Gem and the Holograms. Now, I told you earlier that if USA Cartoon Express was after school, Gem and the Holograms was our before school in the time zone in which I lived. We would watch it every morning, waiting for the bus, eating cereal or whatever else we were doing. And we would be ready just in time for a good 30-minute session, and then the bus would pull up honking. But I loved this. It's about a girl named Jerrica Benton, and she changes through her earrings, of all things, into Gem, who is a rock star. Now, in recent years, there's been a movie made and probably lots of other things to kind of revive Gem, but for me, nothing beats the original. And I can't remember if I have a VHS or a DVD. I'm almost positive I have a VHS of some Gem and the Holograms videos or of some cartoon episodes. They're fun. And I found a lot of her on YouTube as well. When we were looking at this page, my husband and I did force him to watch quite a few Gem and the Holograms videos. Okay, so this says elementary kids have iPhones. But this is what I did in elementary. And they're putting glue on their hand and peeling it off like a second skin. I know that this sounds so random and to you younger kids especially. And I don't even remember having the colored glue. We simply had regular white Elmer's glue. This container looks a bit advanced for our type of glue hand. And I'm not kidding. Now, another thing we did while we're on the topic, we used whiteout to paint our fingernails. I guess we just were looking for any kind of escape during the school day. And so we would invent silly little things like this. Now, atomic fireballs, they may be still a thing. I think they are. I've seen them in one place, and I have one to show you, but I think this may be something that is actually still sold, and I have just not seen them out and about. But when I was young, we were obsessed. They were a couple of cents each, maybe 3 cents to a nickel, and they lasted forever. And if you could get to the bottom of one, you were really kind of cool, because these things would burn the heck out of your mouth. So yeah, most of you may know about these though, but I still wanted to put them on here. And then it says, did your grandma have a button tin? Boy, did she ever. Now, she recently passed, and I inherited one of maybe 3 or 4 button tins. And I'll show you hers. It's nowhere near as cool as the one I remember growing up, which was fuller like this. I've actually added my buttons to my grandmother's tin. Now this says, would you believe 13 records or tapes for $1? This was a thing that everyone I know kind of got roped into at one point. We all have done the send me $1 or a dime, and then they send you 10 or 15 tapes or records, and then you're expected to purchase one per month after. And so you don't see these anymore because of iTunes and because of Spotify and digital music in general. However, if you're a grown-up at all, you probably remember these. They did them with CDs too in the late 90s a lot. Scroll down a bit here. Now this here is a paint with water. It's essentially just what it's named. You dip your paintbrush in water and you color over the picture, and colors appear like magic. Now it's kind of a challenge to keep them in line, as many of us know. When you dip your brush in the water, and then, for example, you attempt to color this tree here, lots of times the brown ink will blend with the blue ink, etc. But it's still a very fun concept. And let's say, for example, that you are at the doctor's office with your child. You could bring this along, and it's a way to paint without being messy, because it's really not messy at all. You can even use a wet sponge or anything with water where you can kind of swipe it over. Now they don't make these anymore, I don't believe. However, I may have one. I don't remember if I purchased one or if I'm thinking of something else, but it's a cool little concept. This perfume here is Exclamation, and I did own several bottles of Exclamation. I don't know if I had this lotion, but I think every girl at one point had this exact bottle here. If someone walked by me wearing Exclamation, I believe that I would indeed recognize it. It's very distinct. It's got a youthful, kind of powdery but still creamy scent to it. And I'm pretty sure they probably don't even make it anymore, but I'd love to smell it just to get that whiff of nostalgia. We were talking about iTunes a moment ago. This is what my iTunes used to look like. And it's funny because this large CD case, actually this is a smaller one. The one that I had instead of 4 across, it had 8 across, so 4 on each side. And I gave it to my daughter, who still has it and still on occasion will whip it out and listen to CDs. Now a lot of cars you'll buy or things like that will not have a CD player anymore. So you've got to kind of actively keep some out-of-date equipment in order to utilize these things. But sometimes it's worth it because it's so much fun. This here, now it won't surprise me if all of you know what this is. You guys may still make these on occasion, I don't know, but when I was young, this is how every score was settled. If you had a question, you either had a magic 8-ball or you used one of these deals. And somebody should know what these are called. I sure don't, but I know that you can put anything you want on front, and then you put numbers on the inside, and then you flip them up and you put the answers to whatever question you have. And if you really don't know how these work, let me see if I can find a way to look these up for you. Cootie Catch? A Cootie Catch? Cootie Catcher. So, okay, this is apparently called a Cootie Catcher. I did not know that. Well, I don't see... Oh, here are those candy cigarettes. Okay, I'm not going to call it a Cootie Catcher, but that's a good starting point if you want to kind of research what they are. Basically, they were the way we formulated decisions that we were unsure of. Hungry, hungry hippos. It's pretty self-explanatory. There are some marbles in the center. Each person grabs a hippo. These hippos have little levers at the end, and you pull them, and your hippo is supposed to get the most marbles, and that's how you win. This is Simon. Simon would light up in a pattern, and you were expected to repeat that pattern. Now, the pattern featured a color as well as a tone of sound. So it would start off slowly, maybe yellow, red, and then you hit it, yellow, red. And then it would say yellow, red, green. And so you would choose yellow, red, green. And then you should inhale and prepare yourself, because that is when Simon will give you the craziest combination, boop, 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 out of nowhere. So it was fun, and I don't own one. They are asking quite a bit for them online, so it's hard to find a vintage true Simon game without paying a pretty penny. But I think that they do make something similar now that is a little less expensive if you're only in it to play the game and there's no nostalgic element attached. These candies, having just passed Christmas, I've seen these at the dollar store and some other places, and when it says reminds me of my grandma's house during the holidays, I can definitely relate, because I don't know if we ever went a holiday to grandmother's house where she did not have these hard candies sitting out in a dish somewhere. And I think that's probably true for many of you out there. This says you don't know true pain until you've been popped in the head with one of these. And if you're a girl or a boy with long hair and your mom would pull your hair back with these, then you know that if she lets go the wrong way or it hits the wrong way, it will knock a dent into your scalp. I think that's probably why I don't see many people wearing them as much. They still sell them, but back in the day, we really wore them a lot. So these are lip glosses in little tins, and I probably had every flavor there is here, and they actually smelled really good. They were very goopy, and of course you had to use your finger to dip into it, so they were germ farms, totally. And add that to the fact that You probably shared it with your classmate, your best friend that sat next to you, who wanted to borrow some lip gloss, so both of your fingers were in it. And it was probably flu season on top of that. So yeah, these were pretty gross. But I still feel, this wave come over me when I see them, because I haven't seen that little container in so many years. Now this is an apparatus for Play-Doh. I think lots of you can tell what it's for. You take the little pieces here and you insert them, and then you push this lever with the Play-Doh inside, and it will make a little sausage, a little star, plus sign, whatever you want. It'll push it out the other side. Pretty simple. We already looked at Skadoodle. This was the best week of elementary school, it says, ever. This was the book fair. And the book fair was fun for a few reasons. Books were only one of them. Yes, you would look at some cool books and they would have some interesting things that you'd not seen, but the best part was that you got out of class for an hour and maybe more. There would be a time of the day set aside specifically for looking at these books and purchasing them. And if you were lucky, then maybe your mom gave you $5 or so, where you could actually buy a book or other things. They had, different kinds of school supplies and fun little things you could purchase. Now this is Spirograph. How it works is you take these round circular pieces and these other little round pieces, how else to say it, and you go round and round with a pen, and it provides you some pins and some other little different shapes, and you create these gorgeous spiral pictures here. And dependent upon the colors that you use and which sizes you use and which patterns you use, you can really create some beautiful things. And as a child, I had this set, and I'm anxious to use it now as an adult. I have recently played with an online Spirograph, and I found that to be very fun. But there's just something about getting your hands into it and doing it for real. Okay, before text messages, these were the good old days. So this was a note, basically, is all this is. This is the specific way we folded notes. This little part at the front, pulled out with your finger, and then it unfolded. And notes were just the way to go back then. There were no texts or anything else. If you wanted to get a message to your friend who was in a different class during fourth period, you simply had to write a note. And maybe you'd write who it was to on the front, maybe you wouldn't, but you always had to fold it in this way because it needs to be secured. You can't just let anyone just see what's on there. I mainly remember passing notes between classes to people in other classes. This is Snoopy Snow Cone Machine. I had this. I don't recall if it was a birthday or Christmas, but I asked for it. And I don't know if they make these anymore, but I found one at a thrift store, and I'll show it to you. I was fortunate that the one that I purchased came with a lot of the mixes and the pieces still intact. So basically, you are making a snow cone for your friends at your home, And there are several different flavors, and they come with the little cups, everything that you need. And the fact that it has Snoopy on it, he was just one of my favorites when I was a kid. This says, remember when McDonald's looked like this? So back in the day, you might have friends when you were 4 or 5 years old that had their birthday parties at McDonald's, of all places. I know it sounds a little kooky, but it happened. And the chairs out in the play area where the playground is, there were chairs that looked like hamburgers. That was part of it. And you really don't see that much anymore, if at all. I just thought it was interesting. Now these Stickle bricks, they have several different names. I have not seen them called Stickle bricks where I have found them, but they do still make them. The reason I went ahead and included them is because my little brother had a huge collection of them, and what's so cool about them is they connect pretty much wherever. If you can see, they are, I'm gonna have to click through. They've got so many places to stick. So basically they stick together like Velcro, and they come in lots of unique shapes and sizes and colors compared to other bricks. So these are scratch and sniff stickers, and boy, let me tell you, I had a million of them. I had a gajillion of these, and these are just a few example: pickle, grape jelly, pizza, and popcorn. But they came in sheets of hundreds, and I had so many. This is a Right On board, apparently is what it's called. I don't have one of these, and I really thought that this would be one of the easier items to acquire, and it's not. And perhaps because this little sheet of plastic easily gets ripped off or it gets damaged in some manner. But it has a little magnetic or metal pin, very similar to the Willy, but with this one you just draw on it. It's just a little pad that you can carry around and draw, and I think every kid's probably had one. These in the corner are Mad Balls, and they do have a modern version of these. I saw the website, and there are several. These may even be the modern ones here, or maybe not. The modern ones, they made them look very similar to the originals from the 80s. And I remember having these around my house. Either my brother had them or we did, my sisters and I. But they're basically a ball with a bunch of ugly designs on it, ugly faces on it. One's an eyeball, but yeah, that's what those are. These are Wuzzles. Now, I did have a Wuzzle. I had Ellaroo, I think is his name. He's an elephant and kangaroo. Is that him? Yeah. My little sister had the yellow one. What they are is two animals combined, and then these books that are sitting here on the front is the story that they have. So they'll be involved in a storyline, or it kind of tells about them, and they were very, very, very popular. This is New Kids on the Block, speaking of very popular. Now, of all of the posters of New Kids on the Block, I chose this one because this is the one that was hanging above my bed. This very exact pose here. And I loved some New Kids on the Block. I especially loved Donnie. Everyone had their favorite, okay? And you can't say that you didn't. Everyone was either a Joey girl or a Jonathan, but I was all about Donnie Wahlberg. He was my absolute fave. Okay. Sorry to keep having to scroll you down here. Now, these are pillow people. And I had the girl with the blonde hair. I think my little sister had this one. The thing about these, if you look them up now, they are on lists with toys that are hard to find and therefore are worth lots of money, which I had no idea about. I've never looked for them or sought them out anywhere. But apparently, if you have these in your home, you need to stop what you're doing and look them up and see if you can sell them, because supposedly, you're going to make a pretty penny off of it. But basically, it's just a pillow with legs and a face on it. These are sweet secrets. I have to click on this. Here's a good example of a sweet secret up close. And here's what they look like closed. So these are fun too, and they're a little harder to find. You can find them, but they're a little pricey for what they are when you consider. It's just a little jeweled locket with a little girl's face and legs and arms. And they have some that are animals and different things, and they added on to it. There weren't as many toys to go around, so lots of us had the same toys. I didn't even think about Hug-a-Bunch. Look, here are Hug-a-Bunch dolls. They had the little furry faces, but I'm getting on a tangent. Alright, so this is called a Skipit, and you put this around your ankle, and this mechanism here would roll around while you jumped over it, kind of like a jump rope. And when I look at it now, I think this would be a great cardio tool for working out. But back in the day, we just skipped around on it looking silly. But lots of kids had this. I remember I had one and my friend had one, and we'd skip down them on the road together. So they were common. This is Fluffy Dogs. I've looked for Fluffy Dogs on Etsy and a couple of other vintage shops, and sometimes I'm able to find these, but since they're made of yarn, in order to find a vintage one in really good condition, you're going to pay a lot because they get dirty. And so they're really easy to age very quickly. And you don't really want to wash something like this in the washer with all of this yarn and what have you. But since I had one as a child, I want one. I'd like to have one. If any of you know where to get some of these items, I'd love to hear about it. I mean, not for $500. I don't want it that bad, but okay. Let's go over here to the Sweet Pickles bus. I think every man I ever dated in my life and every friend I ever had has heard my sob story about the Sweet Pickle bus. This is a little green bus that would come to your door with some little cards inside, and there was a book subscription, and you ordered it and you waited and waited for it to come, and then all of the little cards would start showing up at your house, and kind of like a little subscription for children. And they made it look very enticing on TV. So my mother ordered it for me. And then when it was delivered, she missed the delivery, and so I never got to have my sweet Pickle Bus. It was the 80s, who knows? Maybe it ended up at some other little girl's house who needed it more. But my whole life I wanted the sweet Pickle Bus. And maybe I'll get one. Maybe I'll order myself one. But I would be remiss to not include it on this gorgeous list. Now, these are Monchichi dolls. I love these because they're just cute. They look like an animal, but with kind of a human face. You're not sure exactly what animal these are. This is clearly a female and a male, and they can suck their thumbs. They have a little tail, and they even had a cartoon, I believe, where they kind of sat in the trees and their little tails were swinging. So I have fond memories of these. Okay, so let's talk about Girl Talk, the game, and how I purchased a Girl Talk game somewhere. I can't remember, because I owned this game when I was, I don't know, 11 or 12. What I did not realize is how utterly sexist and just completely out of date this game is. When you read some of the I'll just have to show it to you, is all I can say. You'll need to watch the other part where I'm showing you these items, because this game, it's the best and the worst at the same time. Who remembers doing this on the last day of school? So this is when you had everyone you know sign your white t-shirt. And this may be a Southern thing, I'm not sure. I know that we did it every year at my school, wherever I was. Up until probably high school, maybe. I know we did it in middle school. And then we would take the t-shirts, bring them home, and hang them up somewhere, as a reminder of the year. This is free stuff from the Kool-Aid Wacky Warehouse. When I was growing up, my mother bought lots of Kool-Aid. Essentially just powder that you put in water that gives flavor for your kids, because kids want something, I guess, sweet and sugary, and it's cheaper than soda. So we did have lots of Kool-Aid. And on the back of the Kool-Aid, there were little points that you cut out. And I did. I was pretty faithful with cutting out ours. And then you would turn them in, and you would get items from this little store. And I do recall sending in points, but for the life of me cannot remember what I won, what I bought, if it was a t-shirt or, a doll or something. I don't remember. But when I saw this, it brought back that memory. You can no longer do this, by the way, but it just brings back so many memories for me. Now, these are the Happy Meal toys that used to come in old Happy Meals, and they look like Chicken McNuggets and burgers and fries, and then they transform. So this was the Transformers category of toys from Happy Meals. And what I mean is, it opens up just like a transformer, has the little legs, the arms, and everything. And obviously they don't make these anymore, but I vividly remember them. This is the Fisher-Price Farmhouse. If you've never seen this, I think you must not have ever had a childhood, or where did you grow up? Because I think everyone that I've ever known has either owned this, gone to a daycare that had this, or one of their siblings had it. It's these little people, these little Fisher-Price people, and little cows and horses and chicken. There are so many animals that you can put in this. And then it has a little latch here you open, and there's a little barn area inside to hold everything. These are Garbage Pail Kids, which were totally revolting, disgusting little trading cards that we had as children, and for some reason our parents just overlooked it. They didn't seem to mind how disgusting they are, and I recently ordered some because they came just like baseball cards with a little stick of gum inside. And I ordered a package on Etsy from a vintage shop, and it came complete with the little stale gum from the 80s, and it did have some disgusting little cards, and I will show those to you. One thing I did not remember is that the Garbage Pail Kids were apparently all stickers. I didn't remember that part, but the ones that I received are stickers, and I'll show them to you. Now, I owned this green box. I really wish that I still had this box to show all of you. My Aunt Darlene used to sell Avon, and so she had lots of samples, and these little mint green boxes were always indicative of a whole slew of lipstick samples. And it was so exciting to play in them and to see them, and that smell of the wax. And you guys know I'm a sucker for cosmetics, and maybe that's a little bit of where it stemmed from, was my Aunt Darlene being an Avon girl and getting to try so much color at a young age. And so I was thrilled to death when she handed over one of these mint boxes to me just so easily. She probably had 100 of them, but she gave me this and some perfume samples and just other things that she had from Avon. I remember deodorants, lots of things, and this was by far my favorite thing. These little pianos, I'm not sure where these come from, what their purpose was for, but they came with a little book that would give you the recipe or the sheet music, if you will, to be able to play a full song. So the way that these have these little numbers on top of the keys here, the songbook would say something, for example, like 224 724, and you would type that in and it would play the song. They came in lots of colors. Yeah, they were fun. Now these are puffy stickers. So earlier I showed you the scratch and sniff stickers. These are puffy stickers, a little bit different, but just as the name suggests, they were fat and puffy. You could push them in with your finger, and they came in about every single variety you can think of. I'm realizing now that the 80s were a decade of stickers, and maybe that's why I like stickers, because I do. Now this is the mask I showed you earlier, the little Cinderella mask that's highly flammable. It says, like if you remember wearing these for Halloween, you couldn't breathe or see in them, right? And that's because these tiny little holes. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there was a little rubber band strap on the back of your head, and that was it. And you can see there's Casper, a clown, and maybe Planet of the Apes. But yeah, that was what your mom did. And that couch in the background really says it all. These are clearly 80s children here. Getting into a couple little candies here. I'm going to combine these two, the Tartan Tinies with the Lifesaver holes. They're very similar in the shape. You see this little cylinder shape for the Lifesaver holes. It's very similar to a donut with a donut hole. It's just the inside portion of the Lifesaver, which is kind of clever. So if you can imagine, these are just like Lifesavers. They're flavored just like them. Probably a very small fraction of the calories, but they're fun, and they came in a fun little container like this. The Tartan Tinies are shaped exactly the same, kind of cylindrical, but they are more tart, as the name suggests, and they were a little more powdery. They weren't as shiny like a Lifesaver. And so, but they're very similar. These are kissing coolers, and let me tell you, if they still made these, I would still purchase them. I think you can find a newer version of them, but the packaging has changed. It's just not the same thing. But I think I had so many flavors of this, probably all of the flavors. And the fun thing about these were the flavors were combined. Like there would be cherry cola, whatever. It was usually 2 or 3 different flavors kind of wrapped into one thing. And what it is a small lipstick. It's a short little lipstick, and they weren't too pigmented. They were just enough to put a little bit of color on, so they were great for preteens or teenagers, and I think that's probably what they were marketed toward, as well as having really adorable packaging, and they were flavored, so they were fun, and they were wildly popular. Now this is Silly Putty. I know that they still make Silly Putty. I just don't know if kids know much about it because it's not nearly as popular as it once was. It comes in a red egg-shaped container, and I think that that's not changed. But you can see here that this is exactly how we would use our Silly Putty. We would put it on a comic from the newspaper, and I actually learned to do this from my grandfather. I would play with Silly Putty a lot, and he suggested it to me one day, and it's just something fun we used to do. This is MASH. Now, if you guys don't know what MASH is, I can't help you. You just have to play it yourself. You would pick up the boys, the careers, where you're gonna live, in a mansion, an apartment, a shack, or a house. When I say it out loud, it sounds so silly, but yes, we played this game all the time, including this little spiral at the end, and then you count it all up. Oh my goodness. If you haven't played MASH, go Google how to play MASH, and you need to experience it at least once in life. Now this is a Speak and Spell. It's made by Texas Instruments, right here in Dallas, Texas. When I was young, my uncle said, "I have a gift for you." And he gave it to me, and it was in a box that was meant for a Holy Bible. And he said, "I got you a Bible." And I was like, "Oh, yay." Well, he was kidding with me. When I opened it, it was a Speak and Spell. It would talk to you and ask you to spell out words, or there were several games. These top buttons were all a different variety of games you could play, which now sounds so commonplace. But back then it was really unique and it was technologically advanced. So these vintage bath oil balls, I have tried to get my hands on some of these. I remember them growing up. They used to come in big plastic containers, or maybe it was shaped like a candy cane or something else, a tube. But the little skin was also made of bath material. So you could throw it in your bath under running water, or you could take your finger and kind of smash each one individually. But they each had their own distinct scent, unlike some other things back then. For example, the pink would smell like rose, the orange might smell just like tangerine, etc. Now, Kissing Potion. Wow, the waves of nostalgia over Kissing Potion. And I see that there's cherry and there's maybe this mint, but wherever I was geographically, we only had bubble gum. That's the only flavor I was even aware of forever until recently. And you can see there's this ball at the top, very similar to like a roll-on deodorant, but smaller for your lips. And it was clear, so your parents would probably let you wear it. And it was, like many things then, flavored and scented. It made our lips so shiny. It was probably just made of an oil with a little flavoring, but to us it was everything. Every girl had Kissing Potion in her backpack. Now these little fruit shapes here, that says here, like pixie sticks without the soggy paper tube. And that's true. If you've tried to consume a pixie stick and you have realized that the paper obstructs your direction, if you will, then these are the way to go, because first of all, the circumference of the opening is much bigger, and secondly, there's no paper to get wet. And then another great thing is, you know the flavors. This is all pineapple, this is all grape, and with the pixie stick they can get a bit murky or confusing. So, I'm not sure if they make these anymore. Oh, and are we forgetting the best part of all is how much more is in the container. Pixie sticks are kind of a one hit, and these are kind of, you can carry it in your backpack throughout the day kind of thing. But it's all just preservatives and sugar. Okay. Moving along to these vintage Tupperware tumblers. I won't go into this too much because I've got an entire vintage Tupperware video coming up. I have so much vintage Tupperware because I'm going to start collecting it up and selling it on eBay. So in my journey, I have been fortunate enough to collect some very cool pieces to show you all. So we will save that for that video. Here are bunkers. Every now and again, I will go into a gas station and see bunkers, and I will purchase them because they're so rare, but also I like how they taste. I've always liked them since I was young. They're a soft kind of candy with an inner gel almost that makes it sound gross. It's not. It's pretty good. But they're fruity and they're chewy, and I like them. They're probably terrible for us, but I really like them. Okay. Moving along. Whistle Pops. So Whistle Pops are just as the name says. It's a sucker that actually has the little holes where you can blow on them like a whistle. They come in a few flavors, and I'm not sure if they still manufacture them or if this is an old picture or a new picture. This may be the newer version. I was unable to find the difference, or if there even is a difference. Maybe they aren't made anymore. I know that since someplace sells it does not necessarily mean that it's new. But I remember these as a child. Turning your food into a toy seemed to be a fun theme back then. Now these are bubble burgers, and oh my gosh, if I had $1 for every Stuckey's or every roadside Cracker Barrel in my travels that I have tried to find bubble burgers, I would be rich, because we had these on road trips as a child, and that is the only time I've ever experienced them. And so when I'm in a store similar to that, it gives me that feeling like I want to search for these. And they are what they're called, bubble burgers. If you open these little burger boxes, they are little hamburgers made of bubble gum. They're layered up. They've got the little pieces to them. But they're hard to find. They really are. Now this vintage tape player by Fisher-Price, this was my very first piece of stereo equipment, and it is just as simple as it looks. It's got a forward, a rewind, and a play, and a pause, and a volume. And here's your little eject button. And yeah, this is actually a bit advanced because you can actually rewind and fast forward. On some back then, you had to flip it over and fast forward in order to rewind the opposite side. Yes, that is true. That is a true fact. But on this one, we were fancy, and so we have a rewind and a fast forward. And it just looks so familiar. Like I can almost envision it on my bedroom dresser at home. Over here, we have color forms, which are like stickers, but they aren't. They're a film substance, and there would be a little backdrop or some kind of setting that you would place these little stickers on, and you can dress her. She may have pets and other things, and I have a color form to show you, and I'll show it to you. Okay, so this is a Trapper Keeper, and this is an original. When I look at this design, I have no doubt in my mind that it is the old school, real deal Trapper Keeper. And this had Velcro here at the top, and everyone had one. Everybody had one. Now, your decoration may have had Lisa Frank with puppies, and then the boy that you like next to you, his might have had Hot Wheels, but they were all Trapper Keepers. Now, this necklace represents my entire ages 9 to 12 maybe. These are the charm necklaces that we all had, and I love them so much. I've seriously considered paying $50 for one of these on Etsy, just because that's how much I love it. And you can see that they had charms for everything. First, you chose your necklace, which was this little plastic chain link. This one's in pink, but they came in all colors. Then you would start to accumulate charms. There's an abacus here, an airplane, but trust me when I say you will never run out of ideas for charms. And everybody, I keep saying that about these items, but truly, everyone had this because there wasn't as much variety then. Here's a pound puppy. This is how they looked. A little doggy, and then, of course, he's got a body that's in this little box. And it is supposed to be that you picked him up from the pound or you rescued him. He's got a little certification here, like a little paper certificate of being rescued. And I think that they're all different. I could be wrong about that. I know with Cabbage Patches that they were all the same, but you get a certificate and your own little dog. And I do remember my sister being way more into the pound puppies than I was. So it makes sense that she would want to have one. And I wanted to have a Cabbage Patch, which ironically, I don't see on this list, but I will be showing you a Cabbage Patch for part 2 of this. Astro Pops. So if I were to pull out one of these suckers here, you would see that it's yellow at the tip. An Astro Pop, it's triangle shaped and with lots of colors. So the red, green, and the yellow. And each color, oh, here's a good picture of it here on the front. And each color has its own flavor, which is good and unusual. I was convinced that the yellow portion was banana, but after a small amount of research, I realized it's pineapple. Still delicious. These are jellies way over here. Now, jellies, they're kind of cute. Even today, I think they're kind of cute. I may be definitely on my own with that opinion, but they have some really annoying tendencies. For example, they will make your feet sweat, and when your feet are sweating in plastic shoes, they tend to leave little marks and they look dirty. They leave the imprint of the shoe, not to mention that the bottom of the jellies, they will catch rocks inside of them, and then now you're walking on rocks and you're uneven and it's uncomfortable. So they're definitely not the most practical of shoes, but you could not tell us that back then. We wore them with everything, and that my mood ring really stayed on blue a lot. I was a happy kid. And last but definitely not least, we've got some 1981 Whammo Magic Sand. Now, I have researched and looked up Magic Sand, and you can find it. It's just not the same. I don't know if the formulation has changed, but this is the Magic Sand as I remember it. And now I think it comes in, I don't want to say it wrong, but I feel like it might come in a bag or some other mechanism. It's just not the same. And I think that changes the way it works, which was kind of like kinetic sand. If you've seen, I don't know if I still have a kinetic sand video on my channel or not. I think maybe Heather Feather has one, but kinetic sand, a lot of people probably have videos. It's just the first thing that comes to mind, but not the way it was back then. And you know what? It may be way better now. It's just how your nostalgic memory plays tricks on you. So I remember this little bottle, and mine was blue, so I saved the blue one. And that is my nostalgia board. Now, guys, there were 100+ more items that could have made this list, but I tried to narrow it to things that I can actually show you. You know, if it made this list and I can't show you, it's because it was super cool and I couldn't leave it off. But in order to keep this relaxing and in order to keep this still ASMR friendly, I had to narrow this down. But if you all have other items that you think that I would like to add to this board, please, please, please let me know. Also, I would love to hear if you guys know where to purchase some of these things, because it's become kind of a hobby for me to acquire these items. So anyway, I'm also open and would love to hear your childhood stories and what was cool when you were in elementary, and if you have or had any of these items. I love that kind of thing. Like, that's what I live for, is reading those kinds of comments on YouTube. So all right guys, I'm gonna show you some of this stuff now. Thanks for hanging out with me. I miss y'all so much and I love you.